النهاردة إن شاء الله هنتكلم على receptors وعلى skin functions وعلى some of the diseases of the skin. First of all, we'll be talking about somatoreceptors. We have to say first, we have to define first in detail what a receptor is. لأنه دلوقتي it's important to know what a receptor is وكمان what are somatoreceptors in particular. But before doing this, we have to open a screen and remember the difference between a sensory nerve ending and a motor nerve cell. طيب انتوا سامعيني كويس ولا في lagging؟
لا كويس.
كويس؟ طيب هنرسم كده a very simplified diagram of the central nervous system. يعني لو قلت مثلا إنه this is a section in the two cerebral hemispheres and this is the spinal cord ودي ممكن تنفعنا later on إن شاء الله في nervous system. فده هيبقى the right cerebral hemisphere, right cerebral hemisphere. And of course, the other one is the left cerebral hemisphere, And this is the spinal cord. ولو قلت إنه this is the skin. If this is the epidermis of the skin, and that is the dermis. فمثلا in the dermis of the skin, there is a very fine muscle that moves the hair. هنشوفها بعد شوية اسمها erector pili muscle. Erector pili muscle. طيب, why am I drawing a muscle? علشان in order to display the motor nerve cells and meanwhile display the sensory nerve cells. فلو أنا if I get a pin, for example, and I pin prick the skin, so you feel the pin pricking just because there are sensory nerve endings in the skin, and these sensory nerve endings will carry the sensation to the sensory centers in the brain. The cell body of this sensory neuron is present here. So this is a sensory cell. This is a sensory cell. This is the body of the sensory cell. And this is the axon, Or we can call it a nerve fiber, an axon or a nerve fiber. The axon or the nerve fiber carries the electric impulses to the sensory center in the brain, So if you are pinpricked, you feel the pinprick. If you touch a hot object, you feel heat. If you touch a cold object, you feel the cold sensation. But if you focus on that sensory cell, you find that المفروض الtypical neuron بيكون عامل ازاي؟ الtypical neuron بيكون في cell body وبيكون في dendrites كده وبيكون في axon. هنا axon of the sensory nerve cell has divided into two branches. A branch that goes towards the skin and another branch that goes towards the central nervous system. The branch that goes towards the skin هي دي sensory nerve ending that will carry the sensation. So whenever we say إن إحنا we have a sensory nerve ending, then we are talking about these branches that arise in the skin of the axon. طيب, motor nerve cell مختلفة. motor nerve cell will arise in the brain. يعني the cell body is present in the brain and the axon will descend to give a motor order to the muscle. إحنا النهاردة مش هنتكلم على motor nerve cells. إحنا هنتكلم على sensory nerve cells and the sensory nerve endings. And now we know what a sensory nerve ending is. And we know that the sensory nerve ending starts in the organ. Yani the skin is an organ and the sensory nerve ending starts in the organ and carries the sensation upward towards the brain or towards higher areas of the spinal cord. طيب, what is a receptor? A receptor is nothing but a modified sensory ending. يعني بدل ما السنسوري ending يبقى مجرد terminal branches كده of the sensory nerve cell، لا هيبقى modified. يعني مثلا ممكن يبقى coiled كده ويبقى كمان حواليه capsule. If the sensory nerve ending is modified in shape، يعني مختلف عن ال typical sensory nerve ending، وكمان if it is encapsulated then it is a receptor. Are all receptors, are all modified sensory nerve endings encapsulated? No, not all of them are encapsulated. So we have some receptors that are encapsulated and other receptors that are not encapsulated. What's the importance of encapsulation? طبعا I highly recommend that you take notes لأنه ساعات الريكوردينج بيحصل فيه مشاكل، ساعات ما يرضاش يحصل له uploading، فتake notes please. فالencapsulation, what's the importance of having a connective tissue capsule around the sensory receptor? Encapsulation increases the sensitivity of the receptor. يبقى the more encapsulated the receptor is, the more sensitive the receptor is. So it increases the sensitivity of the receptor. هو فين عمر ودارا؟
أنا هو يا دكتور، أنا دارا.
هاي دارا.
هاي دكتور.
هاي. عمر فين طيب، نايم ولا ايه؟ You don't know؟ طيب anyways، خلاص كده احنا عرفنا receptors يعني ايه، عرفنا انه receptors دي are modified sensory nerve endings، وان هما they might be encapsulated or not encapsulated. Encapsulated يعني surrounded by a connective tissue capsule. Non-encapsulated يعني bare، يعني not covered by anything. وطبعا encapsulated are more sensitive and more specific. Receptors can be divided into several classes depending on the type of the stimulus that triggers them. For example, we could have mechanoreceptors. Mechanoreceptors would be stimulated by mechanical forces like stretch, like pressure, like touch. And we also have thermoreceptors that are stimulated or triggered by changes in temperature. So we have heat receptors and we have cold receptors, as well as proprioreceptors. And proprioreceptors are a special type of receptors that indicate you the position of your joints in space. You might have your eyes closed, but you know, for example, that your elbow joint or your knee joint is flexed or extended even if you don't see them. احنا هنفوكس اكتر على الميكانوريسبتورز والثيرموريسبتورز. البارت دي المكتوبة in a different color is not present on your slide. Please take note of this. We are not concerned with all the details. We wouldn't be concerned with all the details, but only with what is written in red. لأنه in the previous years, the diagram was there. I used to explain only, and the students used to take notes, but the information wasn't on the slides. فقلت الأحسن أحطها on the slide. So you don't have this slide on the presentation أو those details on the presentation. فاضل نعرف يعني إيه somatoreceptors. Somatoreceptors يعني receptors that detect or carry sensation. طبعا الverb detect ده هنستخدمه كتير قوي. detect يعني يكتشف. يعني identify، يعني يدرك. إيه بالعربي؟ يدرك، to perceive what this sensation is. So somatoreceptors are receptors that detect sensations from soma. Soma ده is a scientific term in the embryo. لما بنتكلم عن الامبريو, that indicates the skin and the part of muscles and bones underneath. لأن الامبريو أول ما بيتكون بيبقى عبارة عن سوما، بنبقى متقسمين كده لسوما، يعني pieces of muscles تحتيها pieces of bones and above them we have the skin. ومن هنا جت تسمية somatoreceptors. So somatoreceptors are receptors that detect sensations from those three structures, from the skin, from the skeletal muscles underneath, and from the bones, أو from the bones, muscles, and the skin overlying them. يبقى احنا هنا we are focusing only on somatoreceptors. That could be, of course, mechanoreceptors or thermoreceptors or proprioceptors. طبعا احنا شوفنا قبل كده Merkel's disc when we were talking about the first layer of the skin or the stratum germinativum, وقلنا انه Merkel's disc is concerned with light touch, أو it detects light touch. Why does it detect light touch? لأنه it is very superficial. Light touch يعني إيه؟ يعني مجرد you touch your skin مثلا like with a pad of cotton or with a feather, for example. This is light touch. But if you touch more forcibly, this is not light touch. This is just touch. If you touch more than light touch, then this is no more touch. This is pressure. يبقى البريشر ما هي إلا deep forcible touch. فلما أقول light touch يعني the lightest touch sensation. طيب Merkel's discs are encapsulated، وده يعني معنى كده إنه هما they are highly sensitive to detect light touch. لكن كمان they are slow adapting. يعني إيه slow adapting؟ And what's the importance of this؟ خلينا الأول قبل ما نشوف الimportance نقول إيه الفرق بين a rapidly adapting receptor زي مثلا Meissner's corpuscle اللي هنشوفها دلوقتي and a slowly adapting receptor. Guess what could be the difference between the two? Well, what's adaptation? What's adaptation in general? مفيش خالص؟ Can't anyone guess? طيب خليني أنا اللي أقول، واضح إن أنتوا لسه صاحيين من النوم. A rapidly adapting receptor is a receptor where the sensation diminishes rapidly. يعني مثلا لو أنا I touch my hand أو I touch your hand, at the beginning you feel the touch. You feel it with a certain intensity. But gradually as time passes and I keep on putting my hand on yours, you gradually lose this sensation of touch. كأني مش حاطة إيدي خالص. So this is rapidly adapting, meaning that a rapid adaptation means diminution of the intensity of the sensation rapidly. أما slow adaptation معناها برضو diminution in the intensity of the sensation but slowly. يعني مثلا Meissner's corpuscle اللي انتوا شايفينها هنا فوق دي Meissner's corpuscle, is it as superficial as Merkel's disc؟ ها يحيى.
لا مش as superficial.
ليه؟ They are on the same level. انت شايفها اصلا؟
ما انا شايف هو هنا بس هو واحد بيبقى كابسوليتد تاني انكابسوليتد، مش ده ليه علاقة
انا بس بسأل على الليفل، بقول which one of them is more superficial.
لا يبقى الاتنين زي بعض.
الاثنين زي بعض. They are at the same level. طب ايه الفرق بقى بين الاثنين؟ زي ما يحيى قال انه Merkel's disc is encapsulated يعني non-encapsulated and Meissner's corpuscle is encapsulated. Dara, I need the camera to be on, please. اوكي طيب يبقى هما الاثنين are superficial، يبقى هما they detect light touch ولا deep touch؟
light.
if they are superficial يبقى ايه؟
light.
يبقى light touch. yes very good. يبقى ايه الفرق الوحيد بين الاثنين؟ هما الاثنين superficial، هما الاثنين detecting light touch. يبقى ايه الفرق بين الاثنين؟ الفرق انه Merkel's disc is slow adapting، يعني بتفضل getting the sensation and detecting it for a long period of time، في حين انه Meissner's corpuscle is rapidly adapting. And now my next question is, what's the importance of having a rapidly adapting receptor؟ هو rapidly adapting receptor ده loses the feeling rapidly ولا slowly؟
rapidly.
rapidly أكيد، هو اسمه rapidly adapting. يبقى there is a rapid diminution أو decline in the intensity of the stimulus. Is it good and why would it be good؟ هو فين دارا؟ دارا أنت فين؟ نامت تقريبا. دارا are
يا
you
دكتور
sleeping؟
هي she has problems with the internet، فهي كل ما تفتحي كاميرا الصوت بيقطع وكده.
ايوه بس هي حتى ما بتردش عليا ولا بعتت حاجه على الشات ولا اي حاجه. anyways طيب what's the importance of having a rapidly adapting receptor؟ ايه المفروض ان ده defect مش ميزه. what's the advantage of having this؟
that you don't feel the pain.
Very good. احنا we sometimes get adapted to the pain and this diminishes the intensity of the pain. يعني لو شوكة مثلا دخلت في ايدك في الاول بتبقي بتصوتي منها، بس gradually you get adapted. ولو ان دي حاجة مش كويسة ان انا get adapted to an injurious stimulus. بس think about a classroom مثلا. think about the noise that مثلا KG students do or make in the afternoon and during the last period. At the beginning احنا بنحس بالصوت جامد قوي بنبقى متضايقين منه and then gradually we adapt to that. يبقى it is sometimes good to have a rapidly adapting receptor so that you can neglect the original stimulus and start focusing on other stimuli in the environment. يبقى again justify the importance of rapidly adapting receptors. Rapidly adapting receptors are important because they allow you to ignore the initial stimulus and start focusing or paying attention to the rest of the stimuli in the environment. Now we have two other, طبعا Merkel's discs and Meissner's corpuscle. Can we consider them mechanoreceptors or thermoreceptors? هيا يحيى بتاع الفيزيكس، mechanoreceptors ولا thermoreceptors؟
انهي واحد فيهم تاني؟
Merkel's and Meissner's.
انا حاسس ان هو عشان اقرب للسكن فيبقوا ميكانيكال.
هو اكيد mechanoreceptors لان هما they detect touch and vibration. يعني Meissner's corpuscle detect vibration، فاكيد mechanoreceptors لانه stimulation of these receptors depends on deformity of the cell membrane of the receptor. يبقى if I ever ask you about the difference between Merkel and Meissner's، الفرق بس في encapsulation. طيب أسألكم هما ميكانوريسبتورز ولا ثيرموريسبتورز؟ هتقولوا لي ميكانوريسبتورز. طيب طبعا في difference تانية اللي هي slow adaptation و rapid adaptation، وعرفنا ال importance of the rapid adaptation. بعد كده are they mechanoreceptors؟ Yes. طب justify why are they mechanoreceptors؟ They are mechanoreceptors because what stimulates them is deformity of their cell membrane. When you apply mechanical force بيحصل deformity of the cell membrane of these receptors. هو في cell membrane around the axon أو في cell membrane around the axon اسمها neurolemma هنشوفها في nervous system. يبقى هما they are mechanoreceptors. بعد كده هنتكلم عن a third mechanoreceptor. Yes, okay, go ahead.
هو slow adapter، يعني فرق ما بين slow adapter و rapid adapter عشان لما يبقى encapsulated و not encapsulated.
لا, it's not related to encapsulation. No, it's not related to encapsulation. It is related to the innate structure of the receptor, how it is coiled, and other things. لكن ال encapsulation increases the sensitivity of the receptor. ما هو يعني لما Meissner's corpuscle تبقى encapsulated معناها إنها يعني لما أقول increases sensitivity يا مريم هي ليها علاقة بالintensity of the stimulus مش بالduration of detection of the stimulus. You got my point? يعني Meissner's corpuscles are rapidly adapting. معناها إيه؟ معناها إن duration of being stimulated is shorter. لكن لما أقول إنها it is more sensitive معناها إنها it can detect minor intensity stimuli. And if you apply a very weak stimulus they can detect it.
يعني لما تبقى encapsulated يعني بتديتكت حاجات أقل يعني لما
بالظبط
تبقى
كده. يعني لو انت حطيتي the lightest touch هي تقدر تديتكت it. نكتب الكلام ده عشان ما نتلخبطش يعني عشان نفضل فاكرينه. يبقى ال encapsulation يعني if you have an encapsulated receptor this implies that there is increased sensitivity of that receptor and this means that it can detect lower intensity stimuli. Lower intensity stimuli. This is an entity that is separate from another entity which is the adaptation. لما أقول rapidly adapting مثلا define only one of them. Rapidly adapting, this is related to the duration of detection of the stimuli, with duration of sending impulses to the central nervous system. So there is diminution of the frequency of the nerve impulses that is sent to the central nervous system. Diminution of the frequency of the impulses rapidly. There is rapid diminution of the frequency of the impulses that are sent to the central nervous system. يبقى واحد ليه علاقة بالsensitivity وواحد ليه علاقة بالduration of being excited and sending impulses to the central nervous system. The third mechanoreceptor is the Pacinian corpuscle. And the Pacinian corpuscle is again a rapidly adapting receptor. But it is a deep receptor as you can see. وبالتالي can the Pacinian corpuscle detect light touch if it is such a deep receptor? No. فلازم تكون a very strong mechanical force. وبالتالي it's no more touch. وإنما it is mainly pressure. So because the Pacinian corpuscle, that is still a mechanical receptor, this is the third type of mechanoreceptors because it lies deep in the dermis, so it detects pressure and again it detects vibration, but it detects high frequency vibration. لأنه it's only high frequency vibration that can reach deep into the dermis. لو نبص فوق هنلاقي low frequency vibration Meissner's corpuscle هي اللي بتديتكت low frequency vibration. يبقى احنا عندنا 3 mechanoreceptors: Merkel's, Meissner's, and the Pacinian corpuscle. فاضل بالthermoreceptors. في واحد منهم هنا اللي هو أو هما الاثنين مرسومين هنا. عندنا Krauss and Bulb and Raffini and Organ. الكراوس and bulb ممكن نفتكرها بالكي إنها it detects cold sensation ورافيني and organ detects heat sensation. So Krauss and bulb detects cold sensation and Raffini and organ detects heat sensation, and both are thermoreceptors. Krauss and bulb is more sensitive than Raffini and organ. It is an encapsulated nerve ending, and that's why if the patient closes his eyes, احنا دايما في التست بتاعت nervous system لما تكون بتعمل neurological examination to a patient جزء من النيورولوجيكال examination ان انت بتبقى عايز تتأكد ان هو عنده adequate sensation. فبتعمل ايه بقى عشان تتأكد ان عنده adequate sensation؟ فممكن ان انت تخليه close his eyes عشان ما يشوفش انت بتعمل ايه، وبعدين you apply a cold stimulus and a hot stimulus. دايما ال patients detect يعني if their sensation is intact they detect the cold stimulus before detecting the heat stimulus. يبقى Krause and bulb is more sensitive than Ruffini and organ. Part of the reason is that Krause and bulb is more superficial. يعني هو هنا مش مرسوم accurately قوي في الدياجرام. هو Krause and bulb is a little bit above Ruffini and organ, so it is more superficial, it is higher, and it is more sensitive. Okay. طيب احنا within 10 minutes كده our meeting or the first part of the meeting will end and we'll be sending a new link. طيب we will طبعا الجزء ده دمه تقيل قوي لأنه descriptive يعني، بس بعد كده إن شاء الله الدنيا تبقى أحسن. دي نفس الحاجات اللي احنا اتكلمنا عنها قبل كده. الباسينيون corpuscle as you see طبعا is the deepest. You have Meissner's corpuscle and Merkel مش موجودة هنا، والthermoreceptors. بس اللي احنا ما قلناهوش بقى in the previous slide هو النوسيسبتورز. زي ما انتم شايفين النوسيسبتورز are not encapsulated، بس النوسيreceptors detect noxious stimuli أو painful stimuli. زي ما قلنا قبل كده ان احنا بنبتدي بلايت تاتش، وبعدين لو زودنا شوية بتبقى touch، وبعدين لو زودنا شوية بتبقى pressure، لو زودنا الintensity of the touch بتبقى pressure. Sometimes if you increase pressure ممكن توصل ل pain، لأنه pain is a sensation that is associated with any kind of tissue damage. يعني the main stimulus for nociceptors is tissue damage, as you know from grade 10, لأنه tissue damage results in damage of the mast cells and release of histamine. وبالتالي nociceptors are stimulated whenever there is tissue injury or damage. بعد كده بقى هندخل في حاجة أسهل كتير اللي هي the skin functions، ودي زي wrap up كده to what we have said before. بس قبل ما نشوف ال skin functions ده طبعا this is a colored electron microscopic picture. This is what, guess what this is? What is this? Huh? You see the picture? What does this hole represent? What does the diagram أصلا represent? أو إحنا we're talking the skin طبعا أكيد يعني طبعا this is the skin and the structure I am labeling is a pore, a skin pore, and that is the opening كمان of a sweat gland. هنا نفس الحكاية بس all these green structures or greenish structures you see in the picture are bacteria. So this indicates you that bacteria accumulate around the mouth of the sweat glands and around the skin pores whenever طبعا there is lack of cleanliness. يعني all these are bacilli, they are rod-shaped bacteria. This is how we can see them under a color electron or a scanning electron microscope. Now the skin functions can be easily summarized because we have mentioned them before. Number one, the skin, of course, if intact, acts as a mechanical barrier. When it is intact, it separates or it prevents pathogens from intruding themselves. But it is also a chemical barrier. I think we said this, we mentioned this, for example, about the tears in grade 10 when we talked about the conjunctiva. And it acts as a chemical barrier because we have the sweat, the sweat, that is the secretion of the sweat glands that contains lysozyme enzyme. Do you remember what lysozyme enzyme does? lysozyme. So it is an enzyme. Zyme, the suffix zyme indicates that this is an enzyme, and it causes lysis or rupture of the cell wall of bacteria. So the sweat you produce contains a chemical substance called lysozyme that is an enzyme and that causes rupture of the bacterial cell wall. Of course, when the bacterial cell wall is ruptured, the bacteria will die. Not only the sweat, but also the sebaceous glands contain a chemical substance that is bactericidal, and that is the fatty acids. The fatty acids are organic acids that are produced in the sebum, اللي هو الfatty secretion of the sebaceous glands. And if you remember, the most important organic acid that was produced was propionic acid. لو تفتكروا البي اكنيز اللي كانت بتعمل اكني فولجاريس كانت بتطلع propionic acid، والبروبيونيك acid ده كان bactericidal، يعني it kills bacteria. طبعا you might be wondering يعني if these substances like lysozyme and fatty acids kill bacteria, why do we have bacteria on the skin? طبعا they have a certain capacity of killing bacteria. If the dose of bacteria you have on the surface of your skin is higher than the potential of these enzymes to kill bacteria or these organic acids, then there will be flourishing of bacteria. The third important function of the skin is that it retains body fluids because it prevents evaporation from the underlying tissues. What exactly in the skin prevents evaporation from the underlying tissues?
Keratin.
Yes, very good. Keratin. Keratin is a waterproof substance that is present in all the layers of the epidermis, in all the keratinocytes, and it makes the skin waterproof, meaning that it cannot absorb water from the outside environment, but meanwhile, it does not allow evaporation from the underneath tissues. This is very important. So keratin works both sides, meaning that if this is the skin, keratin in the skin would prevent evaporation from the underlying tissues, and meanwhile, it prevents absorption of water by the skin. So it prevents evaporation from the tissues, from the dermal tissues that lie under the epidermis, and meanwhile, it prevents absorption of water. That's why we say that keratin makes the skin waterproof. It acts both ways. But now I have a question. Haven't we said before, the skin helps in homeostasis, in water homeostasis? We haven't? طيب. Doesn't the skin...
No.
Okay, خلاص, I trust you. Doesn't the skin contain sweat pores?
Yes.
دي قلناها صح؟ إنه we have sweat glands and we have sweat pores. طيب, sweat pores produce sweat, and that sweat will accumulate as droplets of sweat on the surface of the skin. Does this help in homeostasis?
Yes.
Yes. How does it help in homeostasis? I need two ways. Sweating helps in homeostasis.
It helps excrete urea.
Very good. It helps excrete urea, بس كمان it helps excrete. هو السweat is mainly urea ولا is mainly salt and water? طيب يبقى هو it is important to excrete nitrogenous waste like Dara said. It is also important to excrete surplus or excess salt and water. So it helps salt homeostasis. It helps water homeostasis. بس هو does it help water homeostasis only just by excreting water?
No.
ولا by preventing ايه؟
Evaporation.
Excellent, very good. هما مش دولت حاجتين paradoxical؟
Yes.
طيب, how can you explain this paradox؟ يعني احنا دلوقتي احنا مركزين على الwater homeostasis في السوات، لأن السوات لسه كمان في homeostasis عن طريق regulation of heat. لكن أنا مركزة دلوقتي على الواتر. إحنا قلنا إنه it helps excretion of surplus water. لكن في نفس الوقت it helps water homeostasis by preventing evaporation of water from the underneath tissues. Is this paradox a real paradox ولا it is بس apparently paradoxical؟
apparently
طبعا أكيد طالما أنا بسأل يبقى apparently paradoxical. طب ليه apparently paradoxical؟ هل بيتناقضوا مع بعض الحاجتين دول؟
no
طيب explain
بيعملوا
مريم.
بالانس.
عشان الفلويدز طالعة من الفلويدز اللي هي we stop ال evaporation بتاعها بتطلع من the skin، بس السواد طالع من sweat glands.
هو كله طالع من السكين. يعني انت قربتي او انت هتاخدي plus 0.5 عشان انت عملتي discrimination between two different sites، بس مش plus 1 عشان you didn't mention the two sites exactly. لما بنتكلم عن انا بسأل change the color عشان تبقى